Welcome to the Packer Mentality Podcast, where we will discuss Packer news, roster decisions, and what happens during their games. My name is Patrick Corrigan, and I am your host. I am also a Packer shareholder. I've spent my whole life around football and as a Packers fan. When I was a kid, my dad was a high school and college coach. I used to spend a lot of time at his practices, and he would take me to games to help him scout. You can find and follow me on Twitter at Packer Mentality. My podcasts are available on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. So if you don't have the time to keep up with all the news, reports, or social media, or just can't make any sense of them, let me help you make sense of the nonsense. I am here for you. Thank you for joining me. It's a beautiful day, and we are just one day away from the first Packers regular season game, and that is always a glorious thing. The Packers will face what I and most people consider their biggest challenger inside the NFC North this season, the Minnesota Vikings. Let's take a look at the game and the matchups that could define it. So, I want to take a quick minute to address something that's gotten a lot of attention recently, and maybe you guys can help me out there. Can someone please tell me why it seems there are plenty of former Packers out there, including guys who now play for teams that really hate the Packers, but it's only the guys who go to Minnesota that feel they have to tell everyone how they were wronged by the Packers? Uh, Greg Jennings and now Za'Darius Smith. Uh, we all know he was cut by the Packers after last season and ended up signing eventually with the Vikings. He had two really good seasons with the Packers, which I give him full credit for. He was amazing. Appreciate everything he did while he was here. Now that he's a Viking, he is all fired up about how he was mistreated by Green Bay. So, what happened that offended him so badly? Honestly, I think he's being a bit disingenuous about what happened and taking a look at it. So, from what I can tell, here are the events that led to his exit and his unhappiness over the whole thing. After the 2020 season, the Packers changed how his bonus and salary were going to be handled in 2021, which is absolutely their right. Happens all the time to all sorts of players. And he still gets paid his money despite, how they changed it. But this handling and rearranging of how they did his bonuses and whatnot, this helped them re-sign Aaron Jones, and with all this, that allegedly made him unhappy because it made his salary cap hit more in 20 in this season. It would have been a lot higher, and it made it easier for the Packers to move on from him if they needed to. So during the offseason, he changed agents, and then he tweeted in July of 2021 that he needed a realtor in Green Bay. This was his mistake and the turning point of his time in Green Bay, in my opinion. To anyone looking at this tweet means he plans on not being with the team for very long. And unsurprisingly, just a few months later in September, the team didn't vote him as captain after he had been the sole defensive captain the previous two seasons. And apparently he was offended by that. Za'Darius, you made it public that you wanted it out. You wanted out of Green Bay in July. Your teammates aren't going to vote you captain 2 months later. Sorry, just not going to happen. They don't do that. I don't know what world you live in where you can be unhappy and say you want out and your teammates want you to lead them. Just doesn't happen. He had injured his back in the preseason, and he actually played in week one before missing the regular season. He reportedly was hurt that people would walk past him in the locker room and not ask him how his back was doing. Honestly, after the whole tweet and the whole captain thing, I'm not sure how popular he was in the locker room. But to his credit, he returned for the playoffs against the 49ers and played pretty well. But this past offseason, the Packers released him. He's free agent. He comes to an agreement with the Ravens, and I don't know what exactly happened with the Ravens. Ended up backing out of it. Uh, he eventually got a nice deal from the Packers, but the Vikings were not his first choice, despite saying he signed there just to play the Packers twice a year. So before we even look at any of the other players, we have to remember that this game is being played in Minnesota. They have a pretty good fan base, and if the Vikings get a lead and or make a big play, the crowd noise is definitely a factor. And if you've watched the Packers preseason or have been paying any attention, you've noticed that the most of the starters haven't been playing, with the exception of some of the offensive linemen and the rookies. Uh, we haven't seen anything at all as far as a starting unit, unless have been fortunate enough to get to watch a practice. So we haven't seen any of the units played together, at least in a real game or some semblance of game. Let's start with the coaching staff. The Packers returned their head coach, who also calls the offense, Matt LaFleur. Joe Barry returns to run the defense, so we have some continuity from last season. They did lose a couple of key offensive assistants who got great offers elsewhere, such as Denver and Chicago, but that's what happens when you win. You end up losing assistants because everyone's trying to copy you or learn your secrets and implement them in their organization. In Minnesota, the Vikings parted ways with Mike Zimmer and his staff. Kevin O'Connell comes over from the Rams as the new head coach, and he's probably going to run on a similar offense in Minnesota. Ed Donatel, a familiar name, he spent some time here in Green Bay, is the new defensive coordinator and will run the Vic Fangio 3-4 defense that we've seen him run in some very familiar places like San Francisco and Chicago. Returning head coach has won 13 games 3 straight years versus a rookie head coach. I'm gonna say advantage Packers and Matt LaFleur. Now we'll start with the Vikings offense versus the Packers defense. As I mentioned, we haven't seen the starting Green Bay defense that we expect to be on the field on Sunday. There are high expectations for this defense. The defense ended last season playing very well, and now they're going to get back a healthy Jaire Alexander. Plus, they're getting some upgrades at a few key positions. That means a starting defensive line that includes Jerron Reed next to Kenny Clark. Quay Walker will be lining up next to Devondre Campbell. And most importantly, I think, we will finally have Jaire Alexander back there at cornerback. And he'll be opposite Eric Stokes on the corners, and at least initially. And Rasul Douglas will probably initially be playing in the slot, and they'll be on the field all at the same time a lot of the time. Opposing them is a Vikings offense that is very talented. No denying it. Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen, they're about as good as it gets for a triplet of running back and wide receivers. They will be running a new offense that the Packers have seen before, just not when they've been playing the Vikings, but we've seen the Rams run it, among other places. They just won't have seen the version the Vikings will run. So it'll be familiar, just different people doing it. Kirk Cousins returns as the Vikings quarterback for one more year. He's not great. He's not terrible. They've given him some really good weapons to work with, and the results haven't been spectacular, which I've heard a lot of Vikings express their displeasure with him and wanting to move on. But what are your options? Whether those results are a result of poor offensive line play, defensive failures, or coaching, that's up for debate. Like most quarterbacks, he needs time and protection. The Packers must pressure him. And the guys that are going to be doing that will mostly be the Packers defensive line. Green Bay's defensive line will have the advantage over the Vikings offensive line. Kenny Clark has probably been featured in Vikings center Garrett Bradbury's nightmares the past couple of years, and this game should be no different. Clark is one of the best in the league, and the middle of the Minnesota offensive line doesn't have an answer for him. Now add in Jarran Reed, who's an upgrade from any of the guys the Packers ran out there the last year or two, and Dean Lowry, who's coming off his best season. TJ Slayton returns and has looked improved this offseason over a year ago. First round draft choice Devontae Wyatt will be looking to live up to his first round draft pick status. The Vikings returned their starting offensive tackles from last season, but Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill will have their hands full with Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. Smith had 3 sacks against the Vikings in the 2 games last year, and Gary had 1. Expectations for Rashawn Gary are super high, and I expect him to be among the league leaders in sacks this season. He's put in a lot of work. He's looked fantastic during the preseason and training camp, and I'm going to look for him to get off to a fast start this weekend. I'm very excited to see what's going on or happening right behind those guys on the defensive line. The Packers will be returning their all-pro inside linebacker Devondre Campbell and gave him a big, fast, and talented new partner in first-round pick Quay Walker. They'll be matched up against or trying to corral Dalvin Cook. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL. No denying it. The Packers kept the Vikings running game mostly in check last season, partially by forcing them to throw the ball. They got in a shootout in one game and blew them out in the second game. I don't expect the game to come down to the matchup between Dalvin Cook and our defense. While Cook is very good, I think the run defense and these linebackers will hold him in check. In the passing game, the Vikings will test these guys in coverage with those running backs and tight end Irv Smith. But the whole point of bringing in Devondre Campbell and keeping him, and paying him a nice extension, and drafting Quay Walker was to have linebackers who can run with them and can cover the whole field and aren't a liability in coverage. If the Packers defense lives up to its billing, these linebackers should win these matchups. Where this game is going to get interesting is in the Vikings passing game versus the Packers secondary. The Packers defense must put pressure on Kirk Cousins. If Cousins gets enough time, there's only so much the secondary can do. Justin Jefferson is an elite receiver. He is top 5, probably top 3 this year. Against anyone but Jair, he's going to be a problem most of the time, which he showed last year. The Packers had all sorts of problems against him, despite how good Stokes and Rasul Douglas were. Now, this year, the Packers will have Jair and Stokes on the outside, most likely to start, and Rasul in the slot on early downs. In obvious passing downs, or if the Packers get out to a lead, I expect them to have Jair follow Justin Jefferson all over the field, wherever he lines up, and then have Rasul Douglas move to the outside. So you have Stokes and Rasul Douglas on the outside, and Jair in the slot or moving around. It sounds like Darnell Savage is healthy now and is good to go for Sunday, lining up to Adrian Amos. Those safeties will be important in keeping that receiving group in front of them, making plays, covering the tight end. I think the Packers should have an advantage over everyone but Justin Jefferson, and that's going to come down a lot to how much pressure we can put on Kirk Cousins. It's very difficult to tell where the special teams units will be this season after so many issues on pretty much every unit last season. The Packers changed coaches and brought in a lot of new faces. I am positive that we didn't see anything remotely resembling a finished unit in the preseason, and when they hit the field on Sunday, this should be a whole new group on the special teams. I will hope for competence from the Packers, which would be a vast improvement, but have to give the advantage to the Vikings until we see. We have to hope that when we talk about this game next week, the special teams have played no part in the final result. I don't even want to have anything memorable happen. There are a lot of unknowns and question marks that will get answered on Sunday when the starting offense finally takes the field. Three of the guys on the injury report for Sunday were offensive starters. We don't know exactly who is going to be available on the offensive line, and Alan Lazard is unlikely to play. We'll see who. We'll see the rookie wide receivers finally get to show their stuff. Don't. There's no way around it. Leading the offense in his 18th season will obviously be Aaron Rodgers. He's not only the reigning two-time NFL MVP, but a four-time MVP, Super Bowl winner, and a Super Bowl MVP. He's got a lot of stuff in his trophy case. He had a relatively drama-free offseason and a nice big contract to help him feel wanted and secure in Green Bay. He's good enough to overcome any weakness or failure to get a victory all by himself. He's always an advantage for the Packers. Elite quarterbacks get to the playoffs. He's an elite quarterback. I expect a high win total this season, probably 12-13 to get once again, and get to the playoffs. Protecting number 12 is probably the very most important part of the Packers offense, and I don't think anyone outside of the Packers locker room has any idea who's going to be doing it on Sunday. David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, both listed as questionable on the injury report. They were practicing, but Bakhtiari did not practice yesterday, Friday. He spent the practice on the side riding the bike. That's not a good sign for someone who is hoping to play on Sunday. Doesn't mean he won't, it's just not a good sign. What we do know is that Josh Myers and John Runyon Jr. will definitely be starting, most likely in their normal positions at center and left guard, respectively. But after that, it's unknown who's lining up with them. Bakhtiari at left tackle, Elton Jenkins at right tackle, Royce Newman at right guard is the probable lineup if everyone's able to play. In that case, the Packers might have a slight advantage over the Vikings defensive line. However, if only Elton Jenkins is able to play or neither of them are able to play, the Packers have a problem. Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter are both going to be an issue for most starters and definitely for the Packers' backup offensive linemen. Josh Nijman is likely the first man up to take over one of the tackle positions. Newman could move over from guard to right tackle as he did during the preseason, which would mean Jake Hansen might step in at right guard, or the Packers could show confidence in rookie Zach Tom to step in. He could step in at either guard or tackle. He's been playing in the preseason, has looked pretty good. Hasn't had to go up against anyone nearly as good as Za'Darius Smith or Danielle Hunter yet, but he's been pretty solid and actually hasn't allowed a pressure yet. Regardless of who's out there, the Packers will probably give them some help from the tight ends or the running backs or both, and Rodgers will have to throw on rhythm and get the ball out early. Robert Tonyan is off the injury list, not appearing at all, and it's just in time, and he will start for tight end for the Packers. I expect him to be a very large part of the game plan this week with Alan Lazard out. He's a good receiver. Rodgers trusts him, and he has the potential. We saw it 2 years ago to have a big season. Mercedes Lewis and Josiah DeGuara will have their plays and their moments, but Tanyan is the key to success here. I think for a lot of the offensive game plan to work, he has to come up big. Uh, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are either the best or one of the best running back tandems in the NFL. Both are excellent runners and receivers. Expect to see LaFleur exploit the defense by moving these guys around and using them in different ways. I think this you're going to see should see this all season. These guys are way too good to not have them on the field as much as possible. Jones is a very dangerous receiver and could lead the team in receptions this year. I think he's actually the leading the leader for receptions returning to the team with the loss of Devontae Adams. If the Packers have Jones and Dillon on the field at the same time, look out. They can move these guys around. Jones can definitely line up at wide receiver and cause a lot of mismatches on the defense. Uh, if they don't have either guy in the field, expect Amari Rodgers to get lined up in the backfield. They showed a little of that in the preseason. Running back is a definite advantage for the Packers. Finally, we get to the Packers receivers versus the Vikings secondary. We will definitely see Sammy Watkins and Randall Cobb out there, but Allen Lazard is likely out. He saw, actually on Twitter, he was asked the other day what he needed to do in order to play this weekend, and his answer was pray. Hope is not an option here. It's not a plan. So it doesn't sound like he's going to make it onto the field on Sunday. Uh, we were already going to see a lot of the rookie wide receivers in certain situations, but now we will see even more of them. Romeo Doubs came in as a fourth round pick, but he's handled himself as a starter, making plays, putting in the work, having the right attitude from the first day of minicamp all the way through the preseason games. He's been a great surprise, a welcome surprise. Showed a lot of potential. Christian Watson was the Packers' highly regarded second round pick, and although he missed a lot of the preseason, he has made a positive impression on Aaron Rodgers. He is ready to go now. Both these guys bring more speed and athleticism than anyone else in the wide receiver group. It's not even really that close. The offense will be able to stretch the field more with them than with Lazard, Watkins, and Cobb. These rookies will need to be on their game and try to minimize the mistakes while making some plays on Sunday. The Vikings corners aren't great, but Harrison Smith, he is a veteran safety. He's not bad. And we don't know what to expect from this receiving group. I would love to see the rookies step up, but that's probably a lot to ask in the very first game. At worst, I think this is probably a draw between these two units. However, Aaron Rodgers can make this group successful. He's done it before with a lot of no-name guys. I think this is a better group than any of than some of the groups he's had to run out there before when he didn't have Devontae Adams. Uh, Getting it to another level depends on the development and maturity of the rookies. Uh, that's all of the matchups. All there is to do now is to play the game. It's the game of the week, and most of the country will see the game on their regular TV service, even here in Las Vegas, where I'm located. If anything happens between now and game time, follow me on Twitter at Packer Mentality for updates. I'll do my best to keep you informed. I'll go over the game, go over what happened in the game on the next episode, which will be up on Tuesday. Enjoy the game, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend. Be good to one another, and I will see you next week.